People who work in restaurants, what's the never order this item on your menu that customers don't know about? Story 1. Worked at a medium-sized chain sandwich spot where my wonderful manager stopped ordering the premium Wagyu pastrami. So whoever ordered the Wagyu pastrami sandwich just got more regular pastrami for a really stupid price. Our sandwiches were already overpriced there. Was actually the only job I ever walked out on for other reasons. Story 2. I was in the Scottish Highlands and asked the waitress what the curry was. She said, "It's fowl." So thinking it's probably grouse or other wild bird, I ordered it as I've never tasted a fowl before. She later asked how my meal was. I said I didn't like it. She replied, "I told you it was fowl." 30 years later, I can still remember the taste. Answer. When we drove through Scotland, we stopped at the border, heading to Edinburgh from Newcastle, and they had a food wagon there. We go check it out and ordered things like the blood pudding, haggis, and a few other items. One of the items was an egg roll. Story 3. As an ex-chef, I don't order oysters or mussels unless it's a restaurant that specializes in them and is very busy, high rotation, and expertise in handling. Flip side, always order the roast lamb in a Greek restaurant. And sometimes, a menu has an item that seems out of place, but it stays on the menu. This is the chef's hangover dish, and it's awesome. Answer. My aunt took me to a golf club once, Middle Europe, and there were the usual menu items, prawns, steak, etc., and one single hidden Thai dish, cow soy. I asked the waiter why, and he said the chef is Thai, and he was allowed to put one dish on the menu. Of course, I ordered the cow soy, and it was the best I ever had. And I've been to Thailand a few times. Story 4. At Red Lobster. It like the Admiral's Feast. Great! Have you ever ordered that before? Yes. Perfect. I'll put that right in for you. No. Cool. So, you're welcome to order whatever you'd like, but in my personal experience with a 12-ounce plate of fried seafood, you get about 13 to 12 way through and realize you've made a terrible mistake. On top of that, fried seafood does not make good leftovers. You're probably excited for the fried shrimp, which is in the shrimp trio, which also comes with things that aren't fried. Would you like to try that instead? Story 5. I was happy to pick something else and added to the tip later. Story 6. She then said, "You're a long way from the ocean." We again replied that we were. Having set us up nicely, she delivered the punchline. "So are those prawns, boys. Have the steak." Story 7. Ice in your drink. Our ice machine never got cleaned enough. I remember feeling really bad serving people ice from it and staying overtime attempting to get every last bit of pink mold out of it. I wasn't able to fully sterilize it very often. By the time I had another chance, the mold was back. I'm sure some places are better, but I've heard similar from McDonald's employees, so take it as you will. Answer. My first job was at Taco Bell. I came in during a change in management and were trying to get back up to standards. Anyways, one of my first cleaning tasks, they had me clean the ice maker. Big one in the back of the store we had to get buckets of ice from to fill the drink stations. I emptied it out and there's a layer of yellow ice at the very bottom. First thought was that's weird, but figured maybe it's normal. First job at 14. So I unplug it to let it thaw so I could finish cleaning it in a couple hours. But as it thaws, it starts to stink. Turns out, someone peed in it. Also quite a few bugs in it, so I don't trust it anymore. Story 8. Denny's Cracker Barrel IHOP. Do not order salads. Please. I cannot even tell you how many servers make them with their unwashed bare hands, straight into the lettuce and other toppings, slopping it together between tasks. Once at Cracker Barrel, I found a roach in the hard-boiled eggs. Told my manager. He scooped it out with his bare hands and finished making the salad without replacing the eggs. I don't work there anymore. Answer. Just this year at Cracker Barrel, Buddy dropped a chick's tender on the floor. He picked it up, into the fryer oil it went for 10 seconds, then back onto the plating with the others and out it went. I was frozen, rooted to the spot, watching, thinking, surely this isn't happening. As soon as it hit the expo, I speed walked around, tapped the manager to follow me, stopped in front of it and told her what happened. I then went to my locker to collect my things and walked straight out of that hellhole. Never looked back. Story 9. I work in a restaurant and have been in the industry for 15 years. I will say a lot of the old tropes aren't true anymore, at least in my experiences. The seafood isn't fresh on Mondays, and the specials are leftovers. One, especially. I would say there's only one dish on my menu I dislike. It's the brand Zeno. It's just boring. Jerk sea bass. Also at a restaurant with a specific cuisine. Don't order anything that's not in that cuisine's specialty. E.g., don't order curry at an Italian joint. Don't order vegan food at a French place. And don't order anything if the dining room is dirty. The kitchen will be worse. Answer. I generally agree, but I used to go to an Italian restaurant, pizza, pasta, pretty basic but decent, that was run by a couple who emigrated from Cambodia. They hired a West African chef who introduced a roasted chicken with plantains and would serve it with the hottest Cambodian hot chili sauce, and it was amazing. Strange and not Italian in any way, but darn was it delicious. Story 10. Honestly, McDonald's salads. Half of the employees don't wash their hands after touching anything, let alone allergens. Plus, that lettuce was never fresh. We just hid the wilted leaves under a layer of good ones, hoping you wouldn't notice after you drowned it in ranch. Plus, depending on the manager, as long as the salads didn't have mold, we used them, but removed the sticker with the use-by date to make it look fresh packed. What to eat instead? At least at my store, anything with the quarter-pounder meat, as we always kept them rotated in large fries. Every time a large fry was ordered, we dropped a fresh basket. Answer: I worked at McDonald's 15 years ago, and I don't recognize this at all. The owner and management were very keen on food hygiene, washing hands, cleaning countertop and equipment, and we threw out a lot. The salad came pre-cut and was assembled at the start. We also used a different fryer for the vegetarian patty, so it wouldn't come into contact with oil that was used for meat. And when there was pork on the menu, a special grill was reserved for it to accommodate Jews and Muslims. Story 11. Not a restaurant, but a commercial bakery. Don't buy these dessert cups from any store. Walmart link provided merely as an example. They come out of the oven soaked in grease. If you squeeze one of them, there's enough grease to grease a 9x13 cake pan at home and still have grease left over. Also, flies loved the batter before they went into the oven and often were baked into the cups. In a restaurant, don't order these dessert special as it's something that is near expiration. Story 12. I don't know why this has stuck with me so long. Years ago, I worked at a local Italian joint, mostly pizza and pasta. The broasted chicken was great too. I had this sweet old couple come in. Super nice. Guy gets something and the old lady orders a taco salad. I think there's blame enough for both sides here. They were nice, super minor interaction, but it stuck with me. Please remember, kids, just because an Italian restaurant offers taco salad, you don't actually have to order it. Answer: after ordering at the counter of a local Mexican place, I joked with the young woman who took my order that I live in constant fear that the best burger in town is at a Mexican restaurant. Because how would you know? I mean, right? She looked at me and said, "Our burgers are actually really good." Next time I was in there, I got the burger, and she was 100 right. Story 13. Soup near closing time. For multiple reasons, but usually whatever protein is in that soup has been scooped out by staff to appease their tables, even if the pot has been replenished multiple times that day according to demand. Sometimes restaurants also just dump the next pot into the current one instead of replacing it fully, as to not waste product. So high chance when you order it near closing, you're just getting a leftover soup cocktail that has been out all day on a warmer. Another one that IMO is not a super big deal. If the soup is put away or tossed for the night BC of closing work, it's not uncommon for a server to just microwave blast it and serve it. Story 14. I used to serve at a tourist trap, and while some of the food was okay, there were certain items that I refused to let my guests order. "We'll have the spring rolls, please." No, they're disgusting, and one of our most returned items. You don't want them. Can I recommend X instead? My tables were usually very grateful. Story 15. For me, it was mainly, just don't order something brand new during the first couple of days that it's out. My reasoning is not a cleanliness issue. Mainly a, do these chuckle fucks know how to make this? Did they get trained? Issue. I want to receive it how it's supposed to be made. I worked in enough restaurants to know that if something is made properly, it's usually pretty good in some fashion. Not always, of course, but a lot of times in my experience, something being really bad just came from cut corners, not the dish itself. Story 16. I work in a high-end steakhouse that specializes in in-house, dry-aged, in-house butchered, USDA prime beef, and our menu is highlighted by A5 Sanuki olive-fed tenderloin. This shoot is literally among the most highly rated steak cuts in the world. I'll take the roasted chicken. Why do we offer chicken? No clue. Answer. Cause due to sensory issues, I struggle with a steak that's under medium well, but I also know that good quality steak should never be cooked above a medium. I'm not wasting on money on something A, will buy cooked to its best advantage, will struggle to eat, or B, is something I can eat but not cooked as it should be. So I'm ordering the seafood or the chicken. I've also been in places where they flat out refuse to cook the steaks above a medium. Story 17. Mine's a pretty simple one. No matter how good aesthetically the restaurant or eatery may look visually, if the toilets are in a bad state, uncleanly, and smell foul, then the food is going to be disappointing too. Just my opinion. There are a few big independent restaurants here in the UK that I've visited where they've spent and maintained €1,000 on front of house, but the toilets are unmaintained. Whenever I go out to new places, either with friends or with dates, I always excuse myself before ordering to check out the cleanliness of the toilets. Probably sounds crazy, but many years ago I had the unfortunate experience of such a visit to a new establishment that, front of house, was no expense spared. But when I visited the toilets before I left, it was disgusting. The thought then occurred to me of how clean the kitchen probably was. It has stuck with me ever since. Story 18. I'll push this further than what you're asking. I've been in the restaurant industry for 6 years, which in the grand scheme of things is not that long. Still though, what I've really learned, above all else, is don't eat at restaurants, for a multitude of reasons. I've seen or heard too many things to trust them anymore. Plus, they are not at all healthy, and they are not usually worth the money spent. Here's a story that comes to mind. Not mine, but my wife's. Server for 7 years. Buffalo Wild Wings. Won't say the location. They had roaches infesting the kitchen. They loved the microwave. They would still use the microwave even when roaches were all over it. And one of the cooks said that the roaches had favorite sauces, so they would crowd around certain sauce bowls more than others. My wife submitted an anonymous health inspection request after I told her to. They passed the health inspection, and she quit directly afterward. Hearing that they passed made me want to riot. One of my stories. I used to work at this bistro, and the owner was trying to penny pinch, so they told us to wash our own rags in the dishwasher and dry them out overnight under the heat lamp. Well, they still smelled like the old seafood from the day before. They weren't really clean. Someone got sick. No one ever got sick. So I knew that's what it was. I told her that if anyone else got sick, then I would refuse to send a single dish through that window until she solved the problem, and I would report the restaurant to the health department. She immediately got clean rags. However, that told me that all it takes is one careless manager-owner trying to save money, and boom, you're sick. How many owners and managers do you know that don't really know anything about what they own, manage, and try to save money? Bonus fact, I didn't have my ServSafe license for the first 2 years that I was in this industry. No one ever asked. No one ever cared. Now that I'm in a corporate environment, that's different. And this is all really, unfortunately, just the tip of the iceberg. Don't ever get ice in your drinks. No dislike here, but servers are really abysmally bad about deep cleaning. They get paid like $2 an hour when they're doing anything other than waiting on a table. So like, would you deep clean a cold, wet, moldy receptacle for one? Probably not. I'm just saying. I've worked at many restaurants, and at almost every one of them there's been mold in the ice machines. Not at my current place, thank God. Story 19. Taco Bell nachos. You're running the risk of eating chips marinated in month-old grease. When I worked there, they went straight from the fryer to a big white tray, if it was busy, and none were clean. They'd reuse the trays. Answer. Your store sucked then. The Taco Bell I worked at, we'd typically end the night with maybe a tray and a half of chips. That tray and a half would be gone before the next day's lunch was over. If that place is making enough chips ahead of time that they last 2 weeks, either you're making a shitload of chips at a time or don't do enough business to be making that many chips. Story 20. McDonald's maintenance worker here. Stay away from the fraps or anything that is made from the frap machine. It's a black mold and slime breeding ground. The blender compartments are so hard to clean because they've super small spaces, and it's darn near impossible to clean the back of them unless you take the blender apart, which you're not allowed to do. I would imagine other restaurants that have similar frappy machines will have the same issue. Story 21. Places with big menus. Be wary of items that are not featured in some way on the menu. With something like a photo or the first item in a section, or maybe some indication it's an item the place is known for, especially if any of the ingredients are not in other dishes. Even if the place is busy, there are going to be items that they only sell a couple of per day, and those are much more likely to have ingredients that have gone bad. I remember a sandwich at one place I worked that had 3 ingredients that were not in anything else, and we only sold about 1 a day, but we would have enough prepped for a few sandwiches just in case. If you are at a place that is not throwing out expired product, it can get really old really fast. Story 22. Imbo, specifically salads, at a chain steakhouse. Do not order the salads. I've only ever been instructed to deep clean the inside of the lettuce drawers one time in the year that I've worked there. It was vile, rotten lettuce that had turned into literal black sludge, mold in every crevice. I almost threw up like 3 times. Story 23. I'm not a chef, but one absolutely essential rule I live by is, when you're in a very remote place, like the one restaurant in a national park 100 miles from anywhere, just order a burger. Don't order anything fancy or unusual. The menu might have Asian noodles or Indian chicken salad or something like that, but that is probably a bad idea. Just order whatever you see most people eating, whatever they make in large quantities every day. You don't want to wait half an hour for the waiter to tell you they're out of spaghetti, or worse, bring you some terrible plate that sat in the back of the freezer for a year. Story 24. Straight out of graduate school, I worked as a short order cook in a place called the Truckers Inn. We made great food, and our chefs, Auntie Earldine's, standards were ridiculously high. She made everything from scratch, like hand-picking the tomatoes for our spaghetti sauce, hand-making the noodles for her famous chicken noodle soup. She made a KC pork tenderloin sandwich so thin and huge that it was 3 bigger than the bun. Of course, we had leftovers and food near expiry. For those items, we had a chalkboard that said, "Leftovers, La Earldine." Everyone jokingly called it the today's used food. At the top of that list every day was an item called food chowder, followed by creamed yesterdays on stale, formerly fluffy biscuits. There was usually slightly rusty lettuce salad with homemade dressing and croutons, handmade from leftover buns. Spicy rice and beans, probably with chicken, pork, or beef. The used food menu was hugely popular for several reasons. It was comically cheap. It was a fun conversation starter. It was delirious, and people appreciated the honesty. The Truckers Inn was a far cry from the big girl law firm job I expected to get with my fancy education, but I learned more valuable skills from Auntie Earldine than I ever could have from Clarence Darrow. Story 25. At the McDonald's I used to work at, anything after 10 p.m. Food safety policies aren't followed because we don't have enough staff on to do all the cleaning tasks and prepare fresh food. We don't have enough staff because management only look at sales data, not what else we have to do, and they have decided we don't do enough sales to justify extra staff. Story 26. Disclaimer. I am from Europe, so I'm not talking about Starbucks or American-style iced coffee. In certain countries, it's common to order an espresso and a glass with ice and dump the coffee on the ice. It drives me up the wall when someone says, "Not that much ice, I don't want it watered down." You need as much ice as possible if you want an ice-cold, not watered-down coffee. There has to be enough ice to instantly cool down the hot coffee. Otherwise, the heat from the coffee wins and melts the ice, and that's how you end up with lukewarm, watery coffee. Story 27. I worked in bars. I'm looking very closely at the ice in my water before I order something that needs to be shaken. I've seen ice machine horrors that would scare Stephen King. I don't do boozy slushies either. No one fudge cleans the machines thoroughly, and I've seen people use the same mix for weeks on end, just topping up as needed, thus creating some kind of perpetual stew of boozy slushy, dumped into a Cambro to thaw at the end of the night, and refrozen again the next day for service, over and over, until someone finally complains that it tastes funny. No thanks. If I have any doubt, I drink bottled beer only. If shoot looks dirty behind the bar, I don't trust that your lines are clean or that there isn't rodents running around wherever you're stacking the canned beers. At least a bottle's opening is covered by the cap, lol. Story 28. I think they've made it a salad dish now, but it is still extremely salty. Story 29. Tea. It's a scam. The tea bag costs approx 25 cents, and that's already the better stuff, and some hot water. Usually you calculate with either 3 or 3.5 factor for the final price, at least common in Germany. So 0.25 times 3, 0.75 euro, that's how much it should cost. Fine, if you charge 150, whatever, which is already double its worth. But most restaurants will charge like 3 euros. For what reason? IDK why it's so common. Story 30. I don't work at a restaurant, but around COVID time, a waitress at a BBQ restaurant I liked let me know that the chicken tenders were now frozen instead of hand-breaded. It was a bummer because they would toss them in hot honey garlic sauce, and they were amazing. Story 31. Can I answer on a related restaurant no-no? Never sit in a booth, especially if the tables are bolted to the floor. They never get more than a quick rag run across seat, if that, and a quick broom under the table. The milkshake that the 4-year-old spilled last week is still stuck to the front of the seat, where your legs will be. But worse is, that's where the roaches live. Well, one of the places. And those booths can house a lot of roaches. Story 32. I'm not going to name drop it, but at the club where I used to work, you should never order the buffalo fried calamari. Not that there's anything wrong with it. In fact, the opposite. It was so good that the staff picked a good fourth out of the basket before it would ever get to your table. Also, our iced tea was a complete and utter scam. We would use 4 10-cent Lipton tea bags to brew a whole gallon of tea, fill a regular-sized glass nearly 3/4 full with ice, and then pour a comically small-sized amount of tea into that glass, then charge you $4.75 for it. Truly one of the greatest scams of all time. Story 33. I see it's pretty much already been touched on, but if you don't live near an ocean, don't eat sushi or mussels or clams or whatever else. What are you doing? The nearest ocean from here is a 9-hour drive. That shoot is not fresh. I don't care what they advertise it as. That shoot was caught weeks ago. We put out sushi and oysters and mussels and shoot on the weekly buffet at my current spot. It's pretty upscale. Not fine dining, but upscale. I do not trust it. Would not. Could not. No fudge way. This isn't happening at my current spot. But do you remember when that ship blocked the Suez Canal and it fudged up trade for a while? For months, every single box of scallops that we got came in smelling fudge horrid. We got credits for it every time, didn't sell them, but it really opened my eyes to something. If you don't live somewhere that it can be caught or eliminate, don't eat it. Story 34. For my celiac friends, gluten-free bread at any restaurant that doesn't specialize in it or immediately offer it, I've had GF bread of every consistency from, I guess you could call this bread, to rock, to dish sponge, side hit. Whenever you're traveling, always order the food locals are like, haha, you'll never eat this. Most of the time at Fudge Rules, I ate a giant plate of raw meat with egg in Poland last time and it was awesome. And it freaked out all the Polish people I was with. 100 value. Story 35. Any specials of the day. They are trying to get rid of inventory right before it spoils in most cases, before they make a new batch. Also, any restaurant with a gigantic list of items is a no-go place for me. Best ones usually specialized in 10, 20 items at most. Story 36. Back in the 90s, I ate at some pretentious place on Oxford Road in Manchester. Cannot for life for me remember name, but it was on same side as Rockworld. Anyhow, I had muscles thinking I was big and clever. I nearly shoot myself inverted. I thought I was going to pass away pushing mud on the toilet. In retrospect, pushing is by far the worst and least appropriate word to describe my situation. It was fudge jetting out of me. Never again. Answer. Sounds like just a dodgy restaurant practice TBH. Trust me, I know several places in MCR I won't eat at, but we generally don't tend to have a problem with seafood as you're never more than an hour away from the coast. I grew up on the coast here and have enjoyed some fantastic stuff straight off the boat. Just only order it from a place you know isn't going to give you food that's been hanging around too long. Story 37. Nothing with Béarnaise sauce or Hollandaise. They usually don't make that on order. It has been in a fridge for a while or simmering on a stove. When going to a new restaurant, I go and check if a some door to kitchen has a small window. If so, I try to peek in and get a feel of the place and smell. I use smell old grease and like. It is likely that hygiene is not so good. Story 38. Nothing. If it's on the menu, then we want you to order it. The problem are the special requests, like butterfly an 8-ounce filet and cook half medium rare and the other half well done. Sorry, but that's only possible if we sell you 2 4-ounce steaks and 8 ounces our smallest size. Either agree to medium or find a different restaurant. To be fair, you should try to accommodate guests as much as possible, but there is a limit. I'll add olives to your salmon piccata, sure, but I'm not cutting your nuggets into dinosaur shapes. Story 39. With the throwback menu they have, I would not touch the chili cheese burritos from Taco Bell. When that was on the menu regularly, it was only fresh first thing in the morning, and that was if they didn't mix carryover meat into it. It's a powder mixed with water to make a very thick slurry, and then you add ground beef. They would make a batch in the morning and let it ride all day. I've seen them add water to a batch that was almost crusted into the pan because it wasn't ordered all day and they needed it to sell. At closing, I've seen them mix red sauce with beef and toss some cheese on it and called it a day. I have no clue why they brought those things back. Story 40. Second cheapest wine on B menu. Nobody wants to look cheap by ordering the cheapest bottle of wine, so they go one up. Restaurants know this. So second cheapest is their best seller and has the biggest markup. Stick with cheapest or the more premium wines which have the least markup. Story 41. I work at a fusion cuisine restaurant. We don't have a kids menu. Don't bring your children to places that don't have kids menus. 90% of the time they won't like the food and you'll end up overpaying for leftovers. Also, I'm sorry to say, but if you have a ton of allergies or very specific ones, just eat at home. You wouldn't believe how many servers and chefs care so little about your health or straight up don't have the knowledge to avoid issues. Is not worth the risk. Story 42. I worked at a bar before. We switched cooks, and the new cook was taking the shallow cardboard trays that the beer six-packs came in and using it to toss fries. I complained about it being unsanitary, told some of the regulars not to order the fries in the meantime. Owner called me over for a chat, said, "WTF, are you thinking that's how you lose customers?" I said, "No, that's how to keep customers." It was dropped, and the cardboard stopped being used. I thought I was fired for sure, lol. Story 43. I was in Subway today, and a woman came in asking for cold-cut subs. Owner was working and told her they were out. Woman thanked her and walked out. The owner made a face at me and said, "She doesn't want to eat it anyway. I've seen how it's made and what it's made of," and shuddered. Story 44. Some stuff was really good, and they charged like way too much for it. Was probably something like, "Don't eat our lunch, mister, tax." Story 45. I used to work in Pizza Hut years ago. Preparation of the pan pizzas: get a pan, get a frozen disc of dough, go to a massive bottle of oil, pump several large squirts into the pan, put pan in proofing cupboard. Later, retrieve big, puffy pan pizza base to top with ingredients. I just can't. Story 46. I worked at a chicken wing restaurant, and we had a novelty flavor that was intentionally extremely hot. Whenever anyone asked me about it, I would tell them it was a chemical weapon. It was actually pretty high quality, just extremely hot. In the end, it scared off the people it should have and excited those who were into it, so I honestly think it was win-win. Story 47. Not a restaurant, but worked in a cinema. If you thought the pick and mix candy was gross, that's an understatement. I watched a kid run his hands through all the boxes, asked the parent to stop this, ignored. So I asked my manager what to do with it. He said scrape the top layer off and throw it out. This was in 2021, so I imagine there's no protocol now. Story 48. But I could not get past the image of giant white bucket of lukewarm noodles in the sink, and so I never order pasta from any of the big pizza chains anymore. Story 49. Somewhat related. When I worked in a restaurant, I thought it was interesting how incredibly fast it was to make pasta and how long it took to cook a steak. If the same table ordered both steak and pasta, the pasta person is given a food time penalty just because of their steak friend. So if you want your food quicker, just go for pastas all around. The only issue is that pastas have a huge markup in price. Story 50. Never order the specials if you wanted the freshest thing. Specials were typically just stuff that was going bad soon. I also worked at a coffee shop and bakery, and despite what they tell you, not everything is baked in-house and definitely not always fresh. My manager used to tell me to tell customers that items were baked fresh daily and sent from head office. That was a lie. Story 51. I wouldn't say not to order it, but be aware that soup of the day is more like one of the soups of the month. They'll make a huge batch of soup and freeze most of it. Do this a couple times a week, and just rotate which soup is on that day by defrosting it in the morning. Story 52. If you go eat at a busy steakhouse, most of the time the meat is partially grilled ahead of time to make cooking faster. So if you go near closing time, there is a chance you could be eating meat that's been sitting at room temp for quite a while. Also, if you go near opening time, and you order medium well or above, you are eating steak left over from last night's service. Story 53. Unless you know that you like it, don't order anything aged. A couple of places I worked at just hung them up in a corner of the kitchen, and they would get flies and dishwashing detergent and sneezes and God knows what on them. And then when they cut off a steak, you paid for the full weight, even though the first thing they did was cut off 13 of it and throw it away. And then often it would come back hardly touched because they thought it tasted like shoot. It's somewhat of an acquired taste. Story 54. I used to work at this place, like 15 years ago. Remembering this makes me feel old, haha. And I will always tell my guests to not order the quiche pie of the day. My rule is never order the quiche or stew of the day. It's usually old stuff or leftovers from other dishes or about to expire things. I would only give it to 2 pairs of guests that were nasty people. We used to make dishes of the week, really posh and innovative for that time in that neighborhood. Everything it was left from, that it was made pie. 7 out of 10, those quiches were sent back because it tasted off. I'm so glad I quit that place. Story 55. Honestly, everything at that restaurant. At the end of the day, they would tell us to take the sushi off the belt, room temp all day, and remove the salmon and tuna and store it in the fridge for use the next day. So when you ate there, you could unironically be eating sushi that was a week old. I saw chefs digging in their noses and scratching their balls before continuing to work in a very hot and poorly ventilated kitchen. The spring rolls were put both on dustbin lids and on the same surface that raw chicken and pork were being prepared on, because they'd run put of counter space, specifically without a plate. I saw dirty water left at the bottom of the bowls that then had noodles dished into them. And we had to use the same cloths for cleaning the tables and seats on the lids of the sushi plates. And lastly, for the low-sodium soy sauce, we had to mix normal soy with a metric shoot-ton of sugar and water. Story 56. Honestly, daily specials can be touch and go. Often there's something that's about to go off and needs to be used up. Definitely don't order it on a Monday, because that's overstock from the weekend. Might not apply if it's a restaurant known for a rotating menu. Story 57. I used to be a prep food chef at Whole Foods. All that hot food is just stuff from the shelves that has reached or is about to reach its sell-by date. We would heat it up, add a little salt and some herbs or something, and then jack up the price, especially the soups. The salad bar is usually fresh stuff, but the hot bar I would avoid. Story 58. We eat a lot of Asian food in Australia, and I've been told by both a Thai and a Vietnamese to never order the Phnom Penh soup. The explanation I got was that Cambodia suffered so much during the war, and food was so scarce that they would eat anything. Hence, Phnom Penh soup is code for all the shoot left in the kitchen. Story 59. I'm surrounded by chefs, basically boxed in by the bastards, and am a landlord for 3 hospo businesses. Boo hiss. I'm nice, so STFU. Sikh chefs are the absolute business. They are the nicest, calmest, and most precise and obsessed with high standards dudes ever. They don't do substances or drink, so if you see one in your kitchen, know you are in good hands. Take some time to establish a rapport with the FOH as it's not busy, and always tell the owner how much you enjoyed your meals and specific things about the ingredients or how they were prepared. We don't do tipping here, so there is no incentive to try and extract money out of you, and that's why the food is excellent, aside from being fresh and made in-house. Story 60. If you're in a low-end restaurant, never order soup, especially from Chili's if you're in Canada. It's frozen bags of soup that they throw in the microwave and then add chicken to. Story 61. I work at In-N-Out 4x4 with extra of every condiment. Then they'll tell you a mod like animal style or mustard fried, which in our system resets all condiments. For our kitchen, probably any big order with allergies. BC, they have to use separate utensils to cook, clean, etc. Story 62. I work at Pizza Hut in Portugal, and P.else, never order a cheesy pan when we're in a rush. It's so annoying to make. You have to stop everything that you're doing to cut a pan base in pieces and mix it with cheese and garlic sauce. It takes at least 2 minutes in comparison with 30 seconds of a regular pizza.